Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour or so, we'll take a look at the headlines with the Sun's political editor, Harry Cole, and the political editor of the Daily Mirror, Pippa Crerar. Great to see both of you. So, as ever, the front pages, let's take a look. Scotland's Billy Gilmour, along with England's Mason Mount and Ben Chilwell, all question marked now for the Euros after Billy Gilmour tested positive for COVID. Scott to be joking, the Sun reports that England's camp has been thrown into chaos due to the two stars having to self-isolate. Don't expect restriction-free travel abroad until next year, says the Prime Minister, which is the lead for the Eye. But the Times reporting that holidaymakers who have had both COVID jabs could enjoy quarantine-free travel from August. The Guardian leads on the Education Committee's report into white working-class pupils who have been let down by decades of neglect in the English schooling system, according to a report by MPs. The Lord Chief Justice has told The Telegraph that some trials could take place with juries smaller than 12. Armin Laschet, the frontrunner to replace Angela Merkel as Germany's next Chancellor, has warned of the dangers that China poses for the West. There's anger for campaigners after a meeting between the Prime Minister, the Health Secretary and the Chancellor about whether to introduce a cap on care costs was cancelled. So Harry Cole and Pippa Crerar are here. A bit of a mixed bag of front pages, has to be said, but let's dive straight in with the what happens to the Euros. Pippa, obviously great disappointment for Scotland, a massive game tomorrow night. But what does it mean in terms of the championship, indeed the two teams who met last Friday?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. As a Scottish fan, I was very impressed by Billy Gilmour's man of the match, obviously very well deserved after his first Scotland start against England. He obviously is an impressive young player, but you know, I'm an optimist, and our team has got a lot of other great players, and I'm sure that we will obviously put our heart into it when it comes to the Croatia match. It has obviously had the match has had quite a fallout, hasn't it? Because Billy Gilmour's tested positive, and there was those very striking pictures at the end of the match of him embracing his Chelsea teammates Mason Mount and Ben Chilwell as they left the pitch. And I understand that they also stood around in a tunnel afterwards and had a chat and were in close proximity to each other. A lot of people are tonight saying, well, hang on a sec, these two players, these English players, are having to self-isolate and could potentially miss England's big match tomorrow, while the rest of the Scottish squad seem to be okay. And that's because of the UEFA protocol that playing on the pitch is not regarded as close contacts under the COVID rules, whereas embracing someone and standing face to face and talking with them is. Now, what the Scotland squad got up to after that match, which obviously was a good result for Scotland, a draw in the dressing room, and of course there was those pictures of Steve Clarke, the manager, also embracing Billy Gilmour. You know, it does definitely raise questions about whether the rest of the team, who have all tested who've all tested negative, I should say, whether they will, you know, whether it's okay for them all to be playing while the two England players who've also tested negative have to wait longer for their results. It definitely raises questions for fans and a lot of disappointment on both sides, I should think, tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of hugging after that game, wasn't there? Billy Gilmour was seen face to face with the Scotland manager. A video posted and then deleted showed him playing table tennis back at the base with Andy Robertson. I mean, there are so many questions. Should UEFA be saying don't hug or shake hands with the opposition after a game? I mean, you know, where do you start with the questions this is posed, Harry?
Well, I'm fairly certain Billy Gilmour wasn't the only Scot to visit London last week after the scenes we saw and come back with a case of COVID. I suspect there's quite a few fans who picked it up as well after all those scenes in Hyde Park and Oxford Street. Look, questions for UEFA are obviously mounting. You know, this is exactly what the tournament organisers didn't want to happen, but sort of is inevitable if you are going to try and host a major international sporting event in the middle of a pandemic. UEFA obviously currently tonight seem more occupied in trying to get 2,500 of their sponsors and delegates into London for the final and the semi-finals without having to quarantine, with the threat of taking away the matches from Wembley and moving them to Hungary, where there are no travel restrictions currently, if we don't play ball on that. But look, it's a bit of a disaster. One bit of good news tonight. by luck of the draw, the way the other teams have fallen, even if England lose to the Czech Republic, which touch wood they won't tomorrow night, we will qualify anyway for the next round. So there's a bit of pressure off tonight, but this is a bit of a disaster. They're keeping it very vague exactly what's happening there. Gareth Southgate put out a statement earlier saying the team were liaising with Public Health England over Mount and Chilwell, whether they will be forced to isolate. I think there'll probably be some form of fudge where they'll have to take a series of tests. They're all taking lateral flow tests at the moment, which are the type that aren't as accurate, but a rapid, very quickly can be done and turned around in about 20 minutes. So I suspect with a PCR test or two, they might not have to isolate the full 14 days, but it won't do a huge amount of help towards those people that are saying that it's one rule for the international super elite and footballers, and another rule for the ordinary Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it's leading your paper as well, isn't it? It's got to be joking, but you're right, it raises that question too. Why can't you just double jab every player in the tournament? Oh, no, you can't, because you decided you were going to do it on age, and you can't be seen to not be jabbing teachers, but you can be to have a bit of sporting entertainment for people. But also, why can't they be tested hourly in order to be able to play? Oh, no, you can't, because the rest of us then would want to be in order to go somewhere. So it raises all these questions, which is currently facing the government right now, is what do we get for our double vaccination? What do we get for all this testing we're putting ourselves through? And how do we get the economy going again, Pippa, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. But the government, the English members of the government may be regretting tomorrow night not having two of their key players, if it indeed comes to that. But I think they would be finding it a lot harder had they decided to go ahead with giving footballers preferential treatment. I mean, Gareth Southgate, of course, said that he was shouted down for suggesting that the team should be given both their jabs some time ago, back in the spring, so that they would be better prepared for this tournament and dealing with COVID. So it's there's all these questions as we go into the summer. Obviously, we've had there's lots of work going on. There's research studies going on at the moment on thousands of people, pilot studies about whether individuals can be will no longer have to have their 10-day quarantine if they come into close contact with somebody that has tested positive for COVID themselves, but they're not there yet. So currently, double jabbing doesn't give you any preferential treatment. And obviously the idea behind that is that until everybody has had the double jab, or at least been offered the double jab, then they can't be seen to discriminate against younger age groups or people that, for whatever other reason, haven't had their COVID vaccine yet. But it is a tricky period, a sticky period for the government, really, over the next sort of 8 weeks or so until they reach a position where everybody has been offered it.
Yes, and there's the Times quarantine rules will be dropped for the fully jabbed, but it takes us to the summer holidays after the story over the weekend that double jab might mean no quarantine on your return from an amberless country, which didn't sound so positive listening to Boris Johnson today. That's the lead for the Eye. It's inside your paper as well, which we'll come to in a second, Harry. So, I mean, what is going to happen? We're expecting this review on traffic lights, aren't we? What's your best bet?
From speaking to people in Whitehall today, it feels like, yes, it is going to happen. They are looking to reward double jab people, but once lots more people have been double jabbed, and it feels like once again the goalposts have been moved. First of all, it was let's jab the vulnerable, let's jab the elderly, and then we'll unlock. And then it was let's double jab the vulnerable and the elderly, and then it's let's double jab everyone. And you just think we're in this weird limbo land where the promised land has been here for 6 months now. You know, our vaccine rollout has been world beating all year, and still now we are being beaten to the march, so to speak, by our European neighbours who, despite having an inferior jab rollout, have decided to unshackle a bit more. And we're looking tomorrow in the Sun at the effect of what that's done to European Mediterranean beach resorts, which have been flooded with Germans. And so now, as soon as we're able to possibly look and consider the possibility of a European break later on in the summer, everything's going to be booked up. So a bit of controversy there. Boris Johnson under pressure to do something to reap the rewards of our jab rollout by giving people more freedom. There's no point in having this brilliant success rate unless we're actually going to be able to capitalize on it. And it's all very well saying, oh well, we'll look at it in August, But, the summer's broadly over by the end of August when it's going to be. So there's a review next week. There's a review at the end of July. And I think a lot of people are going to be scratching their heads, and not just scratching their heads, start to disregard the rules a little bit, take the rules into their own hands once they've been vaccinated with 1 or 2 doses, and start to think this is all just a bit mad.
Yeah, just very quickly then, Pippa. So far, nearly 60% of UK adults have had 2 doses. The idea is that 70% will do by July the 19th. But all those other people who aren't, what do? Do they sue the government saying, but what about us? It's not our fault. I can't travel. You decided this jabs order. I mean, does it make it very difficult for the government to reward those who are vaccinated?
It does, and I think the reality is that it's going to be moving pretty quickly. So we're not going to get into the likelihood of people being sued or the government being sued, but it will certainly create a lot of unhappy travellers who or people who would otherwise be travelling if they see that perhaps their parents or older friends are able to go abroad. And so I think that's unlikely to happen. Really, it's unlikely to that change to be made until more people are vaccinated.
We wait for that, don't we? Keep up the good work, the vaccinators and all the volunteers. And plenty more still to come on this programme. Dominic Cummings launching another attack on the government. We'll be discussing that after the break. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, the Sun's political editor, Harry Cole, and the political editor of the Daily Mirror, Pippa Crerar. Welcome back to both of you. Harry, let's go to The Guardian. A new report just out by MPs suggesting that white working-class children are the most neglected. But what's The Guardian had to say about this?
Guardian taking obviously a quite Guardian look at this one and complaining about the findings of the report immediately as it drops. So the Education Select Committee, a very powerful committee in the Commons, have this this big study into sort of which children are left behind in the classroom, and they find that white boys are the most sort of forgotten sort of demographic of pupils. Now that's nothing new. We've read that report many times. That's been written by a range of charities, think tanks, MPs reports. What is interesting in this report is actually they look at the idea of white privilege, and this is sort of term that's spat out and fired across the culture wars, left, right, and centre, as this sort of great burden that everyone must sort of flagellate themselves about all the time. And they're actually saying, well, actually, that can have a real effect on white pupils, especially those who are already vulnerable, already left behind. And actually, maybe it's a sort of word we shouldn't be throwing around, especially from the left, so much, because it's having an impact on pupils. Now, there's, of course, a great brouhaha in the committee. The Labour MPs on the committee have all refused to sign up to it. So if they were trying to spark a conversation about this issue, which I think they probably were, they've done very well about it.
Yes, indeed. It's the idea that everything said has an impact, Pippa, even if it's for the purposes of raising equality.
Yeah, I'd be surprised how little I think actually the term white privilege is actually used in schools. And I think it'd be wise to take the culture wars out of this, because it's absolutely the case that white working class children, boys in particular, underperform at school compared to some of their peers. So too do black Caribbean children. Not much difference between them when you look at the poorest who are on free school meals. The reality is that more needs to be done to tackle poverty amongst children. There's 4.3 million children in this country living in poverty. And that, in addition to regional disparity and focusing on restoring some of the support that exists around schools, whether it's extended school day or community groups, youth clubs and so on, that has been so decimated over the last 10 years. Youth services cut by 70% in the last decade. There's almost £1 billion decline in support for exactly these children that need it so badly. And if that would help bolster them and bolster schools, and they do better in the classroom and do better ultimately going on to higher education or jobs as a result.